Hey, what's up everyone on YouTube and Twitter? So a lot has happened since the last video. Bitcoin ended up getting rejected off of this 89.92K area of resistance, ended up breaking back down and then coming down to this support down here around 74 to 75K, finding a bounce. So it's currently kind of in this indecisive zone right here until it breaks back above either 89K or breaks below 74K. We don't really have a direction here. Currently, though, if you zoom in on the daily time frame and you look at the 43 SMA, it's currently back above it, and it had traded below it since all the way back here since February 3rd. It took nearly over 2 months actually to get back above it, and is now trading back above it for the first time. And that's typically a good sign when it's trading back above the 43 SMA. If you look back to last year, consistently we kept on calling all these tops or these moves up whenever it broke back above the 43 SMA, which it did multiple times last year. It had this break above it back here, moved up, had this break above it right here, and then moved up above it right here, above it right here. So seeing Bitcoin trade above the 43 SMA for the first time in such a long time is definitely a positive sign. But ultimately, Bitcoin needs to break back above this 89 to 92K range. If it broke above 89K, it would have its first higher high since way back here when it made this high to the all-time highs around approximately 110 or 111K back here. And then since then, it's just been lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, and then lower high currently. So if Bitcoin can break above 89K, even if it were to pull back, at least it would have a higher high for the first time since way back here in January. So it would be a trend change if that were to happen. But Bitcoin has work to do, right? It needs to continue to push up here. I believe it does favor that this is probably going to push up to this 89K resistance area, but ultimately it needs to break through it or make a higher high. Otherwise, it will just be another lower high or just potentially maybe a double top or something along those lines. So we will have to wait and see what Bitcoin ultimately ends up doing there. If we go over to the stock market, obviously a lot of this has been driven by the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. If you look at the S&P 500 here, the S&P 500 ended up coming down to this major support level. This was around approximately 4,800 and then bounce. But it needs to now get through this resistance area. The main resistance area for the S&P 500 is around approximately 5,500. There has been a lot of volatility over the past few weeks. Obviously, we had multiple 5% candles to the downside. We had the 10% candle to the upside. We had that 3 or 4% candle back to the upside. So there has been a lot of volatility, but ultimately until the S&P 500, similar to Bitcoin, right, chooses a direction, either it breaks back up above this major resistance area or it ends up continuing down and breaking down below this major support area, we won't know its direction overall. It's just kind of in limbo right now. They're both in limbo. They need to choose a direction. If the S&P 500 can make this push and break through this area, then Bitcoin could as well. If we look at the weekly RSI for the stock market, one of the major things I kept emphasizing in the videos over the past month or so is that the weekly RSI needed to make that lower low, which it did last week when it had that breakdown. It made a lower low. The weekly RSI actually went below where it was in 2022 and went as low as where it was in 2020. So this was one of the things we were waiting for, and it did end up happening. And now you could make a case there is a long-term bullish divergence here for the S&P 500 on the weekly time frame. This is a lower low on the RSI, higher low on the price potentially, but we need to see follow through. We need to see the S&P 500 push through this area. And if you look at the NASDAQ as well, the NASDAQ also had its lowest level on the weekly RSI since back here in 2020. It basically reached the same level that it reached back in 2020. Pretty much the same if you look at this. So both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both had their RSIs completely reset. This was obviously one of the most extreme sell-offs we have seen over the past few years, really comparable to what we saw back here in 2020. If you look back here, similar type of fall off here. It was an extreme sell-off, huge rebound, huge bounce, but you want to see it continue to recover and not get rejected at this resistance level for both the S&P 500 and Bitcoin. If you'd like to support this channel, I do have referral links for both Coinbase and Gemini. Both are US-based exchanges. If you trade $100 on Gemini, you get $75 in the crypto of your choice. I've been using both these exchanges for many years, and I would definitely recommend both of them. If you're looking for more content, I do have a Patreon, which gives you access to the private Discord where I'm posting updates frequently throughout the day and through the week. And I also post private videos on my Patreon. If you enjoyed my content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video.